is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Two Guys Watching Football, where I am joined by my good friend, co-host of the Baltimore Beatdown podcast, writer over there as well, Spencer Schultz. Spenny, my guy, how is it going?
It's going well. A lot of action going on. It's a big day in the league. One of the biggest days of, I'd say, the summer or heading into the season. Roster cutdown day, and the Ravens are already starting to make some moves. They're probably gonna hold off on quite a few of those, I would assume, till the deadline, as they tend to do. John Harbaugh talking about strategy yesterday a bunch at his press conference, so they like to keep it close to the vest.
Yeah, and some interesting names are hitting the market. And so so we're here to talk about Kenyan Drake. Obviously, it sounds like Josina Anderson reporting that he's in town and likely to sign. So it sounds like Kenyan Drake is going to be a Baltimore Raven by the end of the day. May not be till tomorrow. This could be one of those situations where they set the final 53, put a couple guys on IR, then sign Drake. So I guess it's Kenyan Drake's going to be a Baltimore Raven this week. Is what it sounds like. Pending physical, obviously, but I don't think health is a concern with him. So we're going to talk about him a little bit. But one thing I do want to pick your brain on, and some people have made this point, and I'm kind of curious, is do you think the Ravens are rushing to make this signing? So we've seen Sonny Michel hit the market. Who was it? Tevin Coleman just got cut. Do you think they're rushing this, and they should have been more patient, or is it just these are all going to be backup level guys and they saw Drake as a really good fit?
I think they see Drake as a really good fit, especially in a power gap scheme. I pulled up some stats from Sports Info Solutions. So he had in 2017, 39 gap carries. He had 10.86 points earned, generated a positive EPA. He's had a couple seasons where he's been one of the, not prolific necessarily, but did have a really good year in that 2017 season with the Dolphins doing so, and as well in the 2020 season with the Cardinals doing so. With that being said, a guy that has had a lot of injuries. Last year, he had a pedal ankle fracture, which was season ending for him. He had a pedal ankle ligament tear in 2020. He missed only one game as a result. Had an ankle injury in 2014. Has had a couple of more nicks and bumps and bruises and those kinds of things. So, coming off of an ankle surgery, definitely a little tough, but I don't know what's going to be guaranteed, what the deal is going to be. He gets cut by the Raiders because he had a really big contract with them, and they end up using him as a pass catching back. He was, I think, 6th in yards per route run among all running backs. He's generated positive EPA as a pass catcher. You can go, see some highlights of him catching some out and up, some rail routes, some stuff like that. So capable pass catcher. I saw PFF Eric talking about his max speed has been pretty consistent. And if you go to Next Gen Stats, they have that in 2020, he had the 3rd fastest speed of any ball carrier behind Raheem Mostert twice, ahead of guys like Jonathan Taylor, Tyreek Hill, and Nyheim Hines. Will the ankle injury affect that? Probably, to some degree, I think a little bit, but he's dealt with ankle injuries before at the same time. So guy that hopefully has multiple gears still, can break away a little bit from defenses and provide some extra veteran presence as a pass catcher. Not terribly versed on him in pass pro necessarily. I would assume that since the Raiders used him in such heavy volume on 3rd down last year, that he's probably fine. I would make an ass out of you and me to say. So gap runner that can do things on 3rd down if he's healthy, and that fits their MO.
Yeah, and it makes sense because that Raiders O-line was trash last year, so I would imagine he was kept in for 6-man protections quite a bit to help them out, help Derek Carr out. But yeah, no, and you've summed up a lot of it. Looking at him as a runner specifically, he's average as a runner. When you look at things like rush over expectation, you go back to 2020 where he had the bulk of his career work, where he had 239 carries. That's the only time he's gone over 200. That's kind of the funny thing about Kenyan Drake is dating all the way back to Kenyan Drake at Alabama as a freshman. He's had 1,236 carries, and that's going back to 2012. And that's because, he spent time behind TJ Yeldon, Eddie Lacy, Derrick Henry. Who else was there? They had
Bo Scarborough.
Scarborough was there. He was just always kind of a committee back, and that's what intrigues me the most. Is I don't need Kenyan Drake to kind of come in and be a bell cow, and he's never been a bell cow, but he brings an interesting skill set. I think he can do a little bit between the tackle. That seems to be be his strength. He ran really well in gap concepts in Arizona. He also, someone asked me, has he done any work at the mesh point in terms of option concepts? The Arizona runs a little bit of that zone option, so he would have got that experience with Kyler Murray in 2020. So that's obviously very valuable coming to Baltimore. But I think the real value add here is the pass catching ability, because they clearly want that. It does appear that maybe we're not going to see J.K. Dobbins in a feature role in the month of September. So it's, maybe we're looking at him, being a bit of a change of pace guy, and seeing Mike Davis and Kenyan Drake get the bulk of those opportunities. How do you kind of see that playing out?
Definitely. I think him and Mike Davis are not necessarily the same player, but very similar in terms of being, a veteran. Like you said, average is not a bad word to describe their productivity. Guys that can come in, be a veteran, take care of the football, probably understand multiple playbooks, playing in multiple organizations. They're going to be able to pick things up relatively quickly in terms of execution and assignment. Are they going to wow you consistently? No. In the Ravens offense, they're going to have a lot of free running lanes, as Ravens running backs get, as a result of Lamar Jackson being the most dangerous runner arguably in the NFL. So those things, we watched Devontae Freeman come in last year. The main reason here feels like they're just, and did they act too early? I feel like they didn't want to act too late and deal with the same situation of trying to integrate a Murray and integrate a Freeman and integrate Tyson Williams and have all these guys that don't have reps in practice, didn't have reps in preseason with them necessarily. Tyson Williams did, and I was very bullish on him going into last year. Obviously, didn't quite work out the way they wanted, so I think they're just trying to be proactive as opposed to reactive a little bit more so. And like you said, J.K. Dobbins has been on the field in pads for 2 weeks. I don't think he's done contact yet or anything like that. So to think he's going to be someone who's coming in September, maybe even early October, and running rampant is foolish and an improper expectation being set, and really gives the Ravens flexibility to say, hey, maybe we want to shut him down for the first 4 weeks alongside Edwards and see if we can have these couple vets, these couple younger guys, go make some plays for a while, ride them pretty hard, I would think, into, week 1, month 1, and then integrate Dobbins back in, week 3, week 4, week 5, whenever it may be. So I think just trying to get ahead of the 8 ball as much as they can. And sure, a guy like Tevin Coleman comes available, a guy like Phillip Lindsay comes available, but to me, Mike Davis, Kenyan Drake, Phillip Lindsay, all those guys are living in the same realm. I don't want to call them a jag, but they're guys, they're NFL guys that have been in multiple organizations, are going to be able to pick up and go play.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. And that's kind of what my response was, is, the delta between these guys is not going to be significant. So I would imagine from the Ravens perspective, we know the Alabama connection. That's obviously very relevant. I think it's always been a little overblown, but I just mean in the sense that I would imagine Kenyan Drake is a guy the Ravens have liked, and he became available and they reached out and there was mutual interest. So they've been kind of working on this since he was probably released from the Raiders. And you got to look at the Raiders. The Raiders have a pretty crowded backfield. They added Zamir White. That kind of looked like there was a lot of, I wouldn't say, well, maybe not criticism, but I think people were confused. It's like you signed Kenyan Drake to a bigger deal to be that kind of receiving complement to Josh Jacobs, but then you also draft Zamir White, who has a similar skill set. So Kenyan Drake always kind of looked on the outs in Vegas since they drafted White. So I think that's kind of interesting. I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing towards Drake. I think obviously they wanted to move on, and I would be concerned if Baltimore was expecting him to kind of come in and be their number one. But, a committee approach to bridge the gap to J.K. Dobbins, I think is a pretty comfortable spot. I feel better about that than I did last year. Very similar to the tackle situation, I guess, is how I'd put it. Are the options ideal? Taking, remove Dobbins and Gus, you go from having, Bell, Murray, Freeman, and now you kind of go to Davis and Drake. I feel a little bit better about how they're going to produce than I did last year with those older guys. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
And Mark here in the comments said, I bet the Ravens wished a guy like this got cut last year. Definitely wish that they were in this position. Murray did some nice things at times. Devontae Freeman did some nice things at times. But again, just trying to get ahead of the 8 ball. And guess what? We're going to talk about, all right, well, now they've got a crunch in the running back room. And who's going to make it? Who's going to get cut? What's going to happen week 1? Well, one of those guys is probably going to miss time being injured. They don't like to rely on rookie running backs typically. I mean, even J.K. Dobbins, they drafted about as high as they ever really draft running backs, aside from maybe from Jamal Lewis and Ray Rice, really the only comparisons there. And they're not going to want Beatty taking 15, 20, 25 offensive snaps in week one or month one. They didn't want J.K. Dobbins taking, 30 snaps. So I think they were going to have him on special teams, maybe let him get a couple snaps, a couple touches, and then rely on guys like Hill that have been in the offense, Davis, and ultimately Kenyan Drake as well. But again, that ankle is a question mark. So surgically repaired. Jonas Schaefer of Baltimore Sun wrote an article talking about how the surgeon basically said that it could be a career-altering kind of injury for a running back that relies on that explosion off of their foot. And now they'll get to bring him in. And if there are more running backs, if there is a surplus and more guys are available and they bring him in, they don't like his physical, then hey, who knows? Maybe they're talking about Tevin Coleman or talking about another back in a couple hours.
I want to hit on a couple things before we're going to keep this around 15, 20-ish minutes just so we're not yammering on, because when Spenny and I get on here, we yammer and I love it. But I want to go to this point, looking at Hill, Beatty, McCrary, probably less so McCrary. I don't think he had a realistic shot at making the 53, but, did they impress you? What did you see in them when you kind of went through the tape? How did you feel? And I'd even include Mike Davis in there, because we did get to see a little bit of Mike Davis. So basically, looking at the preseason games, the 3 games, how did you feel about the running back performances?
I thought that Justice Hill actually looked really good. I thought that he had contact balance. He was setting up moves.
Which is shocking coming off an Achilles specifically.
And
Wasn't that what it was, an Achilles?
The running, it was Achilles. Yeah. What Craig Van Steer wrote, said, the Ravens running backs coach, I think, when he did a press conference about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, was that, wow, he came back and somehow just looks like a complete player. And you saw him getting inside zone carries. You saw him getting, stuff between the B gaps, in the C gap, in, everywhere, in different run concepts, different kinds of things. And I saw some juice there. I don't think he looked to have lost a ton. He was a really, really refined, open speed, open field runner, a track star kind of guy, but looked like he had a lower pad level, was having that nice forward lean that you want into contact, and understood, where he can go get those extra 2 yards by the way he arrives at contact, and has always been a somewhat capable pass catcher too. So I was actually pretty impressed with Hill. I thought Beatty didn't quite look, to have a ton of juice in that same sense, as opposed to maybe my own expectations, but I thought that he also kind of executed solidly and was running behind, different combinations of offensive lines, always a tough thing. So, you got to turn on 105.7 The Fan in Baltimore. They're talking about yards per carry, but it's like, okay, well, that's why something like that's imperfect, but something like rushing yards over expectation. Well, how much should he have gotten versus how much did he get? So I didn't see a ton of instances of him really missing holes or missing reads poorly, but at the same time, didn't see a dynamic ball carrier, but had a couple really nice pass pro pickups, had a catch or two here and there, and was someone that always looked really, really comfortable catching the football, natural hands catcher, fluid route runner, understands how to transition into a runner through the catch point, things like that. So again, not someone I think they're going to rely on in New York or week 2 against Miami maybe, but certainly, a guy goes down, can look fine. And Mike Davis is just, what you see is what you get.
He's a jag.
He's not a breakaway player.
You give him 4 yards, he'll get you 4.5.
Yep. Yep. If he can get, if you're supposed to get 3, he can get you 4. Yeah. But he's not going to be someone that's generating explosive carries. He will make guys miss. He will run through contact. He has really good contact balance, but just not a game-altering player in any way in the open field. Whereas someone like Drake has been in his career, someone that can hit a seam and take it to the house. So if he's able to maintain that speed, they really do have a mix. I mean, I wouldn't expect any of those players to be a real, PFF grades high. Their rushing yard over expectation super high. Their EPA is high. Their total points is high. All of those kinds of metrics, but I don't think any of them are going to stink either. So they've got a jag room full of, a couple vets, couple younger guys, and enough hopefully to work off of Lamar Jackson in the run game and the complicated stuff they do in the run game, and be able to hit a couple holes and do some fine things. So again, could be another back that's added at some point.
Yeah, no, well said. And yeah, the only thing that I'd add is, yards per carries when you're dealing with preseason games is obviously tough. It takes 2 negative runs to really tank your YPC, and that's really what happened with Tyler Beatty. I mean, in that game against the Cardinals, he actually ran really well. I thought he had a couple of really nice reads on power concepts, which was surprising because of the type of player Beatty was at Missouri, was kind of getting him outside the tackles. So I was impressed to see him do work in between the tackles. He had that nice jump cut behind Ben Cleveland, getting his face crossed, and got up for an extra 3 yards versus being tackled for a gain at 2. So there were some small examples of him playing well. But then, you also saw him get completely tricked by the Will linebacker in the last game, and he just kind of runs right into him. So, I mean, he's just one of those guys that it's going to take a little bit of time. I'm glad to see they're not relying on him. I guess that's where I'm going with this. So I'm glad to see that. I just think, you're definitely dealing with some Jags here, just like you were last year. But I think these Jags bring a little bit more to the table than last year. So, and then just to wrap it up here, we've seen a couple guys, we've seen a Devin Kennard hit the market. I think a guy that we all had interest in after 2019, especially for the Sam linebacker role. We've seen, Lynn Bowden hit there's this expectation that Darius Slayton hits the open market. So I guess, do you see anybody else? And if so, or anyone else being added at other positions? If so, who intrigues you?
William Bradley King, guy that I loved out of the draft process, would definitely intrigue me.
Is that the Baylor kid?
What'd you say?
Is that the Baylor kid, the edge rusher?
Yep.
It's all coming for full circle.
Yep, exactly. So he's available. They have a need there. I just saw the Dolphins let go of Preston Williams, who the Ravens probably won't touch. I believe he does have a DV, a domestic violence issue from college, and the Ravens have the moratorium in place on anyone that has any of that in their past. So I'd be very surprised to see them do that. But someone that's always been a bigger target, that's fluid, can go play above the rim, and understands where to separate using his larger frame. Player that's always intrigued me. Also had a little bit of injury problems, but that's the two guys, I guess, that are younger, and I would expect to see maybe a good bit of interest around the league for.
Yeah, agreed there. The guy that's intrigued me the whole time is Darius Slayton. I just think he's got enough speed that he'll threaten you. He'll actually make the secondary think of him. I don't think he's overly dynamic. He's not going to set the world on fire, but he's just an interesting case because he played so well as a rookie. I think a lot of people were like, okay, this kid has something, but then they were so quick to kind of move on and stack options behind him. And that's really what happened. They add, obviously, Kadarius Toney last year played really well. This year they add a slot option. They signed Kenny Golladay, kind of pushed him out the door. I think with his contract situation, they're just going to kind of cut bait and move on. But I do think he can make some sense. Obviously, the trade market's there, but I don't see them going that way. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an exciting kind of 24 hours here as we see cuts, but not only cuts, we start seeing IRs and guys coming back on the team. So, factor that as you're making your final 53 predictions. But Spenny, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for hopping on. It was good to talk ball. And everybody out there, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Peace out.